So welcome everyone to Expanding Your New York State Seal of Biliteracy program. This is a webinar co-sponsored by the New York State Education Department, the Office of Bilingual Education, and the New York State Association of Supervision and Curriculum Development. My name is Candace Black, and I'm your World Language Associate in the Office of Bilingual Education and World Languages, and we are very proud to be collaborating with the New York State Association of Supervision and Curriculum Development to offer 2 webinars this month on the Seal of Biliteracy, both free of charge. Today's webinar is entitled Expanding Your Seal of Biliteracy program, and we're going to be presenting you with strategies for how to expand your existing program. So let's get started. Again, we have entered this into the chat, but in case you prefer QR codes or you want to note the tiny URL at the bottom, we have an electronics handout folder with all kinds of resources, as well as the PDF of this presentation. And I will email all of those who are registered for this event with this information, so you don't need to note it down. In addition, all of the materials that are shown in this presentation can be accessed on our website. You can see the website in front of you, so you know when you get there that you're in the right spot. So today, we're going to focus on 7 different areas of how to expand your Seal of Biliteracy program, ranging from raising awareness to reflecting on your program. Let's start with our raising awareness and identify our stakeholder groups that we're going to be talking about. First are our faculty and staff, then our students, and then finally families in the community. So the first thing we're going to think about as we start to raise awareness is to make sure that our school community, that is our faculty and staff, are well aware of what the Seal of Biliteracy is. And so we recommend that you have an informational presentation at a faculty or staff meeting. You might cover things such as what is the Seal, who is eligible to pursue it, who is the Seal coordinator at the school, and why is it important to develop global citizens? That is, why do we want graduates who can communicate in more than one language and can act with cultural competence? You may also consider at this faculty staff meeting to include which neighboring schools offer the Seal. You might also want to consider that this could be a refresher that you offer each year just for 5 or 10 minutes at the beginning of the year faculty meeting, not only to update staff, celebrate how many students got the Seal in the prior year, but also to inform new additions to your faculty and staff. Now, one of the goals of the faculty meeting is to make sure that every faculty and staff member can give what we're calling an elevator speech on the Seal for students and families. We want every adult in the building to know a little bit about the Seal so that if a parent or student comes to them as their most comfortable contact, that person can give them the basics of the Seal. Again, you want them to be able to say what the Seal is, why students might want to consider it, and who they can contact at the school in order to get more information. At these staff meetings, you can also identify faculty and staff who speak a language other than English. These people are hidden gems at your school and often go unnoticed that they do speak another language. You'd want to identify them not only to highlight adults in the school who speak a language other than English as a model for students, but also to identify those potential human resources that can assist you with the Seal of Biliteracy program. You can then encourage your faculty and staff to engage in your Seal process, and they can do this in a variety of ways. They might join your Seal of Biliteracy committee. They could become a project mentor, and we'll talk about the culminating projects a little bit later. Keep in mind that while proficiency in another language is not a requirement to be a project mentor, it definitely is helpful to be able to assist the student as they are developing text in another language. Another way in which faculty and staff could engage in your Seal process is by becoming a panelist. And here is where proficiency in the language of the presentation is required. Another way you can raise awareness is to ask faculty and staff to capitalize on their positive and supportive relationships with individual students to encourage them to pursue the Seal. Sometimes all it takes is a kind and supportive word from a caring adult that the student has what it takes to do the seal. And so having each member of your faculty and staff be equipped with this elevator speech gives them the opportunity to be able to say to those students, hey, why don't you try this program out? So let's move on to students. How are we going to raise awareness among them? Well, you really want to take a multi-pronged approach, just like we did with the faculty and staff. You might start with things like in-class presentations by teachers, and these naturally happen in classes like ELA, ENL, and world languages. We would recommend that you do these in-class presentations each year of high school, just around that course selection time for 9th through 11th graders, and then probably in September for any seniors that you have. This falls very nicely with talking about students what the next level course is and the kinds of things that they will do in this year. And it really orients them to a full high school program so that they know what they will be able to do at the very end of high school and what they'll get as a result. You might also consider addressing awareness in things like morning announcements or school newspapers that you could engage students to write. But I found that the most powerful way of getting students to apply for the seal is to actually invite them. And so we talk about this idea of being given an invitation to come to a party versus being invited to dance. And being actually invited into the process is a much more powerful thing. And so you might collect some data as well as teacher recommendations for students who would be candidates for the seal. And we would recommend that you send home a personalized letter that you can do through mail merge. And you can also do this via email to all potential seal candidates, letting them know about the program and that they are well suited for it. You may also consider indicating on this letter the points that a student may have already earned towards the seal to leverage that motivation to pursue this award. Now, another way to raise that awareness among students is really our school counselors. And we refer to them as the constant. The one true constant throughout high school for students tends to be their school counselor. We encourage those school counselors to inform themselves about the Seal of Biliteracy so as to be able to talk to students about the seal throughout their high school career and to encourage them to pursue it. You might also consider holding a student interest meeting on the seal. At such a meeting, you want to make sure you make the process doable. It's very important not to frame the Seal of Biliteracy as an elitist program that only a few students can attain. This is the difference between a norm referenced and a criterion referenced test. This is not the bell curve where only a few students can make it. This is any student who can achieve the proficiency designated. So make sure that students know it is feasible and that they'll be supported throughout the process. You also want to highlight to students that this is an award that they get for demonstrating the proficiency. Now, the vast majority of students who try to get the seal actually get it, but the numbers of overall students in New York State who get the seal relative to those who could get it is pretty small. Only about 3 to 4% of New York State graduates get the Seal of Biliteracy. So this is something that can really distinguish them. At such a meeting, you also might consider inviting past seal earners to speak. New graduates love coming back to school because now they're college or career students, and they'll come back and they'll talk to students about their process and why they decided to pursue the seal, how they might see being able to speak another language relate to their future career. Now, our final stakeholder group are our families and the community. As we mentioned before, you might want to send a personalized letter home addressed to the student as well as their family to inform them about the seal and indicate that their student is a candidate. You could also hold a parent information meeting, and we would encourage you to include not only senior families, but also 9th through 11th grade families to make them aware that this is a possibility. Alternatively, you could give a brief presentation at open house or some other school event to pique parents' interest about this award. We do want to highlight that we have a variety of resources to help you provide this communication in the preferred language of families, and I'll show you those documents towards the end of this presentation. I'm now going to shift to raising awareness for all of our stakeholder groups and the kinds of strategies you can use that will address all of them. The first one is to include a significant mention or a page on the seal in your course guide or program of study. Putting that in black and white makes it very real for parents and for students. You might want to include what the seal is, who is eligible for the seal, and why students should pursue it. You also might want to include something that talks about when students can begin working towards the seal, which is any time during their high school career. This makes the project a little bit more doable because it spreads it out over a longer time period. You could also develop a page on your district website for the seal, including such things as information on the seal, links to various documents, both in-house documents as well as to our state-developed documents, and contact information for families that are interested in learning more. Again, we encourage you to provide multilingual support for families whose preferred language is other than English via some of the documents we have available in the top 10 languages of our English language learners. You could create a bulletin board that is prominently displayed in your school with not only information on the seal, but photos of both past and present seal candidates, as well as contact information or a room number where students can go if they're interested in pursuing this award. If your school uses social media, consider posting information on the seal at key times in the year. You could promote a student and/or a parent interest meeting in the fall using these tools. You could indicate that information will be available at a school event on the seal, or you could use social media to celebrate student success. So that resumes our raising awareness strategy. We're going to move on to how we can increase or expand our seal programs by better identifying candidates. So every school wants to make sure they're identifying all potential seal candidates by casting a wide net to capture students who fit in one of 4 eligible categories. The first are current English language learners, or ELLs. These are students who have been tested in English and identified as English language learner and therefore eligible for services. You want to take this group and find out which students have reached at least the expanding level, which means they are in the target range for reaching commanding by the end of their senior year. Our second group are former or ever English language learners. These are those who are identified as ELLs, but who have since achieved the required level of proficiency to exit that ELL status, but very likely continue to speak and write a language other than English. Our third group are our heritage language speakers. Now, if you're familiar with our notification form, these students are otherwise known as never ELLs whose world language or home language is other than English. These are students who were never identified as English language learners because they're most likely bilingual, but they happen to speak a language other than English, either as a home language or as a language that they perhaps have lived in another nation or studied extensively. And then finally, we have our last group of students. These are our world language learners. They are never ELLs whose world language or home language is English. These students were never identified as ELLs and are studying a world language at school. So now we're going to do something in reverse. How do you identify these candidates? Well, our world language students are our easiest students to identify. You go to the world language teachers, you find out the rosters of students who either have completed or are completing a Checkpoint C course with an 85 or better. You can also probably download this from your student management system if you're an administrator or a counselor. Next, we're going to go to the left side, our current ELLs. We find out who these students are by talking to our ENL teachers. They have rosters of their current ELLs with their most recent NYS Seal scores and can tell you if they've reached the expanding level or not. For our former ELLs, you can also go to those ENL teachers or your school counselors and get the rosters of any student who took the NYS Seal at any time in their academic career and found out that they have exited L status. This last group is really the challenge, your heritage language speakers. So basically, we have your ELA teachers ask students in their classes. And I choose ELA because they have everybody. You can also ask the counselors. We're looking for students who are never identified as Ls, but who happen to speak a language other than English. So your ELA teachers might explain what the seal is for 5 minutes in one of their classes and say, hey, if anybody speaks a language other than English, let me know. I'd like you to hook you up with our seal coordinator so that you can learn more about pursuing this award. Now, ideally, your school is going to have a student management system that captures if a student speaks a language other than English at home, whether or not they're an English language learner, but that's not always the case, but it's definitely something to work towards. If you want to get an idea of what languages we focus on for our publications, we do that for the top 10 languages of our English language learners. And you can see by this graph, the vast majority of them are Spanish, but we have significant populations in Arabic, Chinese, Bengali, Russian, Urdu, and a couple of other languages. There are more than 200,000 current English language learners in New York State from all grades, and there are even more former Ls and heritage language speakers. These students, many of them, are ideal candidates for the Seal of Biliteracy. So we're hoping that you are able to make that effort to include them in your recruitment process. So let's begin that identification now that we know what those 4 eligible categories are. After the end of junior year, we're asking you to identify all students who are either on track or close to being on track that are rising seniors by identifying any points they might have already earned towards the seal. Now you do this by essentially asking for this data either from your district data coordinator or an administrator or a counselor at your school. These are the criteria to earn the seal. And so if you can find out for those rising seniors what they got on their ELA exam, which students generally take either sophomore or junior year, they may already have a point towards the seal. For the Ls, you can do the nicest lot score. You can look at other Regents exams for Ls not in translation, their ELA course grades, AP and IB exams of both English and world language, as well as the world language course grade in 11th grade. You can look up the languages spoken, get any transcripts from other nations, as well as look at any bilingual programs. And so by populating these on track and close to being on track students, you're going to be helping yourself because you can use one of the forms that we have to keep track of these points. We actually encourage you to begin tracking students starting in 9th grade, noting some of the pre-indicators. So students who have course grades in their ELA 9th grade course that are 85 or above, you might want to begin tracking those students. And the same thing for world languages, as well as any scores that students might get on an AP exam as freshmen or sophomores. We're hoping that school counselors can utilize this data as soon as freshman year to begin talking to students who are on track and make that Seal of Biliteracy part of the student's 4-year graduation plan. We encourage you to use the end of year data form proactively. So instead of, for instance, waiting until the spring of senior year to use that form to only report students who have met the criteria, you might want to consider using an end of year data form to actually track those cohorts. And I'd make one form for each graduation cohort and then update that as students earn points. You want to be sure if you do this that you request annual data updates to make sure that you're catching all students. So students are going to leave your school. You're going to want to remove them. You're going to have new students who enter the district. If they meet the criteria, you're going to want to add them. And you may have students that blossom a little bit later than others and become on track for the Seal of Biliteracy after their freshman year. So moving on to our 3rd strategy for expanding your program. It's about streamlining the Culminating Project. Now, most students need to complete a culminating project, at least in a world language, to earn the seal. In English, we often have students who can get their 3 points without the project. They'll do an 80 on their ELA exam, an 85 or better in their ELA 11th and 12th grade courses, and then maybe an AP or IB exam. But for world language, it's very challenging for students to get those 3 points without doing a project. And that's why we see the vast majority of our students doing that. So since this is such a common part of the SEAL process for schools, we're going to encourage you to think about a couple of strategies to streamline and make this a more effective process. The first thing you want to do is spread that workload. So think about engaging faculty beyond just ELA, ENL, and world language to serve as mentors and panelists. Remember, those mentors or advisors for the projects don't have to speak the language. And in fact, if the student is interested in something that requires technical knowledge, like science, you might want to reach out to that science teacher. If you speak another language, though, we're also looking you to engage faculty as panelists. These are people who are going to evaluate those projects. Now, keep in mind, if a student does an English culminating project, any adult English speaker at your school can serve as a panelist. And we encourage you to make this a more feasible process, as well as to make sure every other adult knows about this by having someone other than, say, the ENL or the ELA teacher participate in the panel. So bring in that assistant principal, that school counselor, and ask them to serve as panelists. If they speak English, they qualify to serve on the panel. You might want to also ask students who they would like to have as a panelist. So hopefully every student has a caring adult in the building that they've really connected to. And asking that student, hey, we need another English speaking faculty or staff member to serve as your panelist. Who would you like us to invite? You can also reach out to your community members, and they can serve as both mentors and panelists. You can reach out to local colleges as well as to community-based organizations and tap into these people who speak other languages and get some great PR in the process or public relations for your school, having a community member involved. Possibly the most powerful way to streamline the culminating project process is embedding the project in coursework so that it is already the work that a student is doing for the course itself, meaning the project doesn't become an extra thing that the student has to do in their senior year. Now, there is an extra part of it, and that is that the project must be presented to a panel of at least 2 people. That may already be embedded in what your project is or may not. But embedding this provides the natural support within the coursework where the teacher can serve as the mentor or advisor and makes it much more streamlined and feasible for students. So our next strategy for expanding our SEAL program is celebrating visibly, making sure that the school, community, parents, students, and faculty are aware of what you're doing. So you might consider presenting certificates and medallions to students at a public event, such as a formal awards ceremony or a Board of Education meeting. Include a program as a keepsake so that students have this to think about. It raises the esteem of the program and makes them feel special. Consider providing students with some additional swag or stuff we all get. Some schools have chosen to order honor cords for students. At my prior district, we would order an inexpensive honor cord that was a tricolor cord, and the colors of the tricolor cord represented the colors of a flag of a nation that speak that language. So French was red, white, and blue, for instance. You might also consider maybe getting a pin for your Seal of Biliteracy students. Some schools display a plaque at the school engraved with the name of SEAL earners by year, so that is shown to everyone who enters the building. You may also include a notation in the graduation program for all SEAL earners. Some of the things that I've also seen, and this is one we did at my prior district, is the school would conduct graduation parades at lower schools with future graduates in full regalia. So in those last couple days of high school, when elementary and middle schools are still in session, our schools would put our graduates into manageable groups and they would bus them over to the other school. The students would be wearing their full graduation garb. This is usually, I think, after graduation practice that they did, including their Seal of Biliteracy medallions. And the students would parade around the school. And so I have this memory of elementary students sitting, legs crossed on either side of the school hallways as the big kids walked by them in their beautiful robes and regalia. You might consider celebrating by publishing the names and photos, if possible, of SEAL earners in an e-blast that your principal sends out, or a school newsletter, or the website, or even a local newspaper to celebrate this achievement. Another project that a couple of schools have done is to highlight the voices of SEAL candidates by creating a promotional video where students talk about why they pursued the SEAL. And they can even do that in the target language. And this can be used for future promotion. Now, if this sounds like a whole lot of work for you, you know what? Delegate. Involve students. If you have a video production class at your school, or you have a student that's just really into that, engage them in managing a project like this. They'll absolutely love it, and I'm sure they'll produce something of very high quality. So our next section, I'm entitling SEAL Program Hacks. These are some hints that I've gotten from SEAL coordinators over the years that have made their lives a little bit easier. First and foremost is building those relationships. So if you are the SEAL coordinator, a lot of the work falls on you. And you need to be able to, especially as your program grows, to be able to delegate some of that work to others. So build those relationships with people like your district data coordinator, your school counselors, and your various teachers, and engage them in the SEAL process. One of the biggest hurdles for the end of your data form is identifying these nicest numbers. These are 10-digit numbers that are unique to every single student in New York State. And if a student starts at school A and transfers across the state to school B, that nicest number follows that student. Now, your district data coordinator uses this number to report data to the state because, for instance, I have a very common last name. My last name is Black. And so this allows us to use a nicest number that is unique to me. Getting these nicest numbers is not an easy task, especially in the first year. They're generally not accessible to teachers who are often the SEAL coordinator. Sometimes guidance counselors have them. Sometimes they're available on your student management system, but most often they are managed by your district data coordinator, hence the need to build that relationship. But the hack is, instead of waiting until May when you have to submit that end of your data form that requires those numbers, get those nicest numbers once you've identified every student that's going to pursue the SEAL that year. So maybe by January or February. And that way, for those students that don't make it, you can just remove those numbers, but you don't have to scramble in May when you're already busy with 100 different things to get these numbers. I have found that my life has been very simplified by using mail merge. So I have lots of Excel spreadsheets where I manage all my data, and I create these personalized communications, whether they're letters or emails. I'm sure you've gotten many emails from me with your name on it, to be able to communicate with students and families about the SEAL. And so you can create these personalized communications literally with the click of a button after you've drafted the body of the letter. You can use this for things like invitations to apply for the SEAL or for reminders, for instance, on upcoming deadlines. There are other ways to also utilize technology than mail merge, including using a shared drive such as Schoology or Google Classroom to coordinate with other adults remotely to do things such as keeping track of student progress with a document that's accessible to everyone who needs it, or to store student work for presentations. I saw some great examples of this when I visited City Honors in Buffalo and Lancaster High School, who had these systems all set up so that those student presentations were available to all the adults who needed them. Again, you want to think about how you can really capitalize on the wealth of technological knowledge of your students. If these things seem foreign to you, go out and engage some students, have them be an intern for you, even if it's informal, and have them help you with the technology and promotion of the seal. You also want to think about how can you spread out that student workload. Students, as we know, often have that senioritis in this year. And so how do you spread out the workload within their high school career to avoid that? We encourage all schools to have students complete the work of the seal in their best language, whatever that is, by the end of junior year, because most likely they've already hit that required proficiency level of intermediate mid or intermediate high by then. They can get all of that work out of the way by junior year so that their senior year can focus on the work in their second best language. It's also less likely that a student is going to back out if they know that they've already done half the work for something. And then a final hack that you can do for your SEAL program is being flexible. We have this idea of voice and choice, right? Students being able to have a voice, have a choice in the process of what they do for their SEAL work. So while some schools will have a prescribed SEAL project, other schools will have a project embedded within a course that allows for students some agency in choosing what they might research. Your main question is, for this one, in addition to choice, is when students can complete the work. So remember that students can do work at any time during high school, as long as they have that required proficiency. If you have a native speaker of a language come in and at 9th grade, they're already at intermediate high, which is pretty likely for a native speaker, they can complete those SEAL work for that language in their 9th grade year. Now, you can't actually give them the SEAL until they graduate, but they can get the work out of the way earlier. So our next strategy for expanding your program is really reflecting on your program after you've done it for a year. What's working well? What are your areas of growth? Are there any barriers to student participation that you can identify and address? But you really want to focus on the future once you have at least 1 year under your belt. Think about what are the barriers to the growth in the program. Is staffing an issue for you? Are resources or time or funds an issue for your program to grow? Identify which of those barriers you can remove, and then which are the ones you're just going to have to work around. I'm going to give you a couple of examples here. If your school uses an application for the SEAL, which is a perfectly acceptable practice, is that a barrier to students? Perhaps students who don't speak a language other than English, or don't speak English extremely well, and that may be a barrier for their parents. Does your school provide flexibility in the topic that they can choose for their culminating project, knowing that students are going to be more motivated to research something of interest to them? Does your school provide academic writing support? Is there a writing lab, after school help, or a dedicated research course that helps students with academic writing? Are there organized opportunities for peer review of their culminating projects? Does your school provide direct support for the SEAL other than academic writing? For instance, some schools have monthly gatherings like a club for candidates to give them an opportunity to speak with others about the challenges they're encountering as they go through the SEAL process. Do you have enough mentors, and do you have enough panelists? And how might you work with your community as well as, say, your local BOCES to increase the number to what you need? Our final strategy is ask for assistance. So one of the biggest things that you can do is to enlarge your SEAL committee and then delegate the work so it doesn't all fall on you. You can ask neighboring school districts that offer the SEAL if you can connect with their SEAL coordinator. Talk to them about what they've encountered as challenges and how they've overcome them. Maybe even observe some of their culminating project presentations or other events. You can talk to your teachers, your ENL, ELA, and world language teachers. Ask them what they're hearing from students about why some pursue the SEAL and others don't. Better yet, survey students and ask them what their motivations were for either pursuing or not pursuing the SEAL, and then see if there are ones that you can address. Now, you may not know this, I hope you do, but every area of New York has what we call an RBERN, a Regional Bilingual Education Resource Network, and you can see the color coding on the map here. You have a person who is designated at each of these RBERNs that is your Seal of Biliteracy person. And you can find that person by clicking on any of the links or contacting me, and I will put you in touch with them. I want to invite, I apologize if I'm putting you on the spot here, but there are a couple of these people here online. I see Anna Stoops and I see Maria Fenton, and I apologize if there's someone else on here that I missed, but these are people who are RBERN specialists. Maria and Anna, would you like to introduce yourself and let people know where you're from?
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Maria Fenton, and I am with the Mid-State RBERN. Eric referenced it earlier. Eric, prior to my coming to Mid-State RBERN, I was a teacher in the Solvay School District. Eric was my administrator and incredibly supportive of my venture of placing the Seal of Biliteracy into our school programs and pursuing that with some of the students that we had. And so I just want to say thank you again, Eric. It's a pleasure to be able to see you in another position now and still advocating for this amazing program. I would encourage you to reach out to any of us, even if you're not in the Mid-State region. If you come across my name and email, please forward a question or any kind of celebration, and happy to assist.
Maria, would you briefly explain what kind of supports you've provided in the past for the Seal of Biliteracy schools?
So we, when I first started working with Mid-State RBERN, the Seal of Biliteracy was just getting its footing in New York State. And I used a process to sort of leverage the many BOCES that were in the Mid-State region, and used the BOCES and their individual consortium, their component district list to really leverage the work. And so I gathered a few people from each one of those districts, component districts in each of the BOCES, and together we devised the way in which we could support each other. And even though the autonomy ultimately goes back to each one of the district, the process of collaboration and working together is incredible. It's an opportunity to just be able to support, to think together, to brainstorm. Some of the ideas that Candy just put out are amazing strategies, and quite a few of those came sort of by trial and error, right? These were ways in which we found we would be able to help each other. Some of the districts are large and they have potential for many Ls and for many opportunities for candidates. And then others were just beginning to get their feet into it and had just a few students participate, but everyone benefited from the communication and from the collaborative effort from everybody. And so I personally also went into the district because I love the relationship building and loved being able to firsthand take a look at students and talk with them. And I'm an L myself, so it's really wonderful to be able to honor proficiency. linguistic and cultural. So I just loved it, and I loved the process. And again, our burns are a tight-knit group, so reach out to any one of us and we'll make sure that we assist you, whether ourselves or forward you to a colleague that's in your region. Thank
Thank you,
you.
Maria. Anna, would you like to introduce yourself and talk a little bit about how you support?
Sure. So I'm Anna Stooks. I'm from the Midwest region, right next door to Mid-State, in the Rochester area. And this year has been my first full year supporting district.
Anna, are you still with us? I think you might be on mute.
Yep. Sorry about that. Not sure what happened. Not sure what the last thing was that you heard, but I've been running a Seal of Biliteracy support network throughout this past year for districts in our region that are seasoned in running the Seal of Biliteracy, as well as new districts, just to kind of have them brainstorm together, learn from one another, and keep on track of all of the wonderful things that need to be submitted and kept track of throughout the year, especially for the newer schools exploring this. So, and also I've been able to participate thanks to Candy reaching out this past year with some school visits of reviewing presentations and how the panel goes. And that's been rather informative for my practice as well in terms of support and really seeing the wonderful work that's being done out there.
Thank you. And so Anna and Maria's counterparts exist at all of the different ARBRNs, so we encourage you to reach out to them. I also want to mention that you can reach out to neighboring school districts, and one of my colleagues is online, Shauna Sweet, who is the Director of English Language Learners and World Languages at the Greece Central School District. And she formerly worked at the Midwest ARBRN and now has a fantastic setup for a school celebration of the Seal of Biliteracy presentation. So Shauna, I don't know if you're open to people contacting you, but sometimes our colleagues are going to be our greatest possible resource. So please make sure you reach out to people and I would be happy to put you in touch with them. Okay, we're getting close to our end here. We're going to open it up to questions in just a second. Moving forward with asking for assistance as our strategy, you can join the SEAL Forum. So if you're not part of this group already, the SEAL Forum is a monthly meeting offering support for the Seal of Biliteracy, available to any educators, counselors, administrators who want to know more about the seal or are working towards the seal, whether it's their first year or they're a veteran. These meetings are held once a month via Zoom after school, and they give you the opportunity to learn about new initiatives, to discuss with other participants different questions, to network with them, to find solutions. Attendance is completely voluntary at this event. You do get CTL credit for those meetings that you attend. And as I mentioned, it meets virtually. We do upload minutes to a shared Google Drive. So even if you can't make it, you can still get access to that. And you get a handy dandy little badge that you can put on your email signature or your website for being a member. Now, NYSET also provides a wealth of assistance in this, from our handbook to different modules. And I'll show you briefly what these are. We have our Seal of Biliteracy handbook, which is a must read for anyone offering the Seal of Biliteracy. We will be updating this in the next month or so for the new school year. We have our guidance toolkit, which has 8 different modules that walk you through the process of offering the seal for the first time, and I'll be updating those this summer. We also have our Seal of Biliteracy one-pagers. So these are concise briefs for various stakeholder groups, from students to teachers to counselors to families to advisors. It talks about what the seal is, how it benefits students, and really caters the questions for the audience. And the great part about this is that, these are available, the ones for families and students, in the top 10 languages of our Ls. So remember, I talked to you about resources that support multiple languages. You can find those right on our website. We also have some support for that culminating project. In order for students to do a project in another language, they need resources. And so we have collaborated with the Goethe Institute to create a Wakelet, which is a free online content curation platform for resources in various languages. And you can see a little screenshot here. And this is not all the languages that's available, but that's all that could fit on my screen at the time. We also produce an annual report with all kinds of facts and figures, so you can see how the program is growing. And we have these available for the last 4 years. We also have regional reports available and infographics if you're interested. And by the way, we highlight student photos if you submit them in that report. So if you'd like to get some PR for your school, please submit your photos. So these are the strategies that we've talked about today. I hope that you're going to find at least one of them useful as you consider how you're going to expand your program. My contact information is available here right on this screen. You can always email me. You can also call my office line, or better yet, just call my cell, because my office line rings at my cell given the amount that I travel. You also have the website here for the Seal of Biliteracy, which you don't have to memorize. You can just type in 2 acronyms, NYSED for NYSED, and NYSSB for the seal, and we should be that first hit. With that, I'd like to thank you for coming to the Seal of Biliteracy. I hope this has been helpful. I really appreciate all of my Auburn colleagues who came today and were able to speak. And I want to say a special thank you to Eric Larison, as well as the New York State ASCD for their co-sponsorship of this webinar.